Hey, welcome everybody. We're on a new journey, starting again another cycle of Mesillas Yesharim from the beginning. As the author says right away in the beginning, that the purpose of the book is not to read it one time, but to constantly review Hasmada v'Chazara. So that's what we're following the instructions, that the way to get the most out of the Sefer is to continuously learn it. So even if we would know everything, even if we'd be able to be tested on it and get 100, it still wouldn't be fulfilling utilizing the Sefer to its fullest. It's only if you continuously involved.
Was this Sefer early or later in the Ramchal?
So I happen to have, someone asked it a couple of weeks ago, so this is from one of the editions of the Ramchal, a different book, the Igros Ramchal. So it has here a timetable of his life, and he lived, here it says he lived to the age of 39. And what is that?
Where did he live in Sfat?
He first lived in Padua, Italy, and then Amsterdam, and then he came to Eretz Yisrael, lived in Akko. He's buried in Tveria, they say. Yeah, he's buried in Tveria.
It's accurate?
I can't say.
Is there any arguments? Or?
I don't know. I didn't study the subject, but here it says that he wrote Mesillas Yesharim at age 33.
Wow.
He came to.
Where was he at the time?
I think in Amsterdam. He was in Amsterdam at the time.
He wrote Mesillas before Derech Hashem?
That's what I'm wondering.
Derech Hashem was written when he was 29, and the Mesillas Yesharim when he was 33.
What did he do for 4 years?
Found the books, try to find the publisher.
I understand the books that it says here from Derech Hashem, and then Mamar al Haggados, also the same, and Mamar al Korim. We learned Mamar. That's relatively short, and Derech Chochma, and the Vikuach between the Chacham and the Chassid, which is the other edition of the first edition of the Mesillas Yesharim. And then at that age of 33, he wrote Mesillas Yesharim, Sefer HaDiktuk, Sefer Higayon, Mamar al Hadrasha, Sefer al Hamalitza, Derech Tvunos. Very fascinating. And most of his Kabbalah form he had written earlier, and at the end he was not writing Kabbalah anymore. There was a reason why he wasn't writing Kabbalah, but if the fact that the Mesillas Yesharim and Derech Hashem are of the latest form, it means that he's already the big Mekubal that he is, and it's adds very much to the Sefer to know that the author is somebody who's from the Rosh Chachmei Kabbalah. So even though he doesn't talk openly about Kabbalah over here, but it's based on Kabbalah. And also he was Gadol in the Nigla also.
Where was he born?
In Padua. At Rabbeinu Nolad Padua, in Padua, Italy. And
How old was he when he came here?
36.
He died at 39?
Yeah.
From
Yeah.
what?
I think there was a plague of some sort, if anybody's more familiar with his biography. It says that I can't testify to the truth of anything that it says here, but it says at age 14 he already had finished the Shas, the Zohar, and the Kisvei Ari.
He was Sephardi?
And he wrote his first sefer at the age 17, Lashon Limudim, and then like the ages don't fit with us. That he wrote a Pirush on the Zohar at age 22.
But one's supposed to be married.
So
40 years old.
So those conditions are sometimes spoken about. I don't know all of them, but the fact about 40 years old, I think the source is not from the Mekubalim, was really from those who were studying philosophy. There was it's a big issue of philosophy, Aristotle philosophy, and people thought that that's what the depth of the Torah was, to go into Greek philosophy at the time. It sounds very strange to us. It is. But at the time, it was such a big issue that they thought as truths, that they thought that it's necessary to study philosophy. And they said, and they were scared of doing that because they saw people fell when they did that. So they said, don't do it until you're full of Shas and Poskim and until you're age 40. But I don't think it says so in the sources about learning Kabbalah. The fact about being married, I can't say. I don't know. Okay, so that's the Mesillas Yesharim. What?
Never married.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, but he wrote. He got married at a later age. He didn't get age. I think he was. At what age was he married? At age 24.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. That's how old I was.
I don't know. I don't know much about his. I don't know much of his biography, but I am very impressed that the Mesillas Yesharim is a sefer that he wrote towards the end of his life, after he had written all the Kabbalah. I think he had a daughter, and she also died in the Magef or whatever. I think that his wife and his daughter
So
died.
basically, there's an Akko that they maintain from the Ram.
So. Just before we start, Mesillas Yesharim has become a sefer which is recognized, I think, by almost everybody who looks into self-growth. That Mesillas Yesharim is the sefer, and they talk about that the Gra had spoken about how valuable it was in a tikkun olam, that it's changing the world. The Ramchal is very. The fact that he wrote other books also about dikduk and how to speak and how to talk and how to think, he's very accurate in dikduk also. He wrote a book on dikduk also. His language is very accurate, and his expression and the way that he presents the subject, very systematic. He wrote the book according to his klalim that he wrote in other books of how you're supposed to speak and write and express, present, and it's a very, very medukdak. It's a very accurate and precise book. Also, when he explains the subject, he goes according to a ladder. It means he's telling you how to build it, that a person builds himself. There's a big problem when people want to grow, so they grow haphazardly. That they find something which sounds like a good thing, and they'll do that. Anagas tzaddikim, they'll find books that talk about different good things that different people did, and they become a big mishmash. They're not organized. They're not growing healthy. They're not building themselves from the bottom up. They'll build the 10th floor before they have a basement, or even if they have 10 floors, but there's not a good foundation, and everything is very shaky. And he tells you what the yesod is, and he builds one floor on top of the next, and he tells you where not to rush and not to jump. Everything is clear, precise, organized. Very, very beautiful sefer how to grow in Yesharim, Mesillas Yesharim. How to grow. The other books he has, Derech Hashem, is not a book of avodas, but this is a book of how a person grows. So it's extremely organized and yudayak, and the more that you read it, it's readable even for a 13-year-old. But the more that you read it again and again, you see more depth in it, and a person can grow till the end that it says about the Ruach HaKodesh. This is the path to Ruach HaKodesh. By Ruach HaKodesh, it doesn't give you instructions anymore. Once a person gets to that level, so then he'd have to have other books to study how to come to Ruach HaKodesh. But this would lead you a person up till Ruach HaKodesh as much as he can. So we're ready to start again on our new cycle. Amar Mechaber. This is Hakdama. This is the preface of the author. Hakdama Samachaber. Amar Mechaber. The author says, "Hachibru hazeh lo chibartev l'lamed l'vnei adam eis asher lo yodu." This composition, this book, I didn't write it to teach people that which they don't know. No chidushim. I'm not coming to tell you new news. Ella lazkiram es hayadu alehem kvar u'meforsam etzlam pirsim gadol. Just to remind them what they already know, and it's very obvious to them. Ki lo simtzav rov devarai ela dvarim sherov b'nei adam yodim osam v'lo mistapkim behem klal. You won't find in most of my words only issues that most people know them and don't have any doubt about it. Now this first sentence, this is the hardest part of the Sefer, is absolutely not true. That the book is full of chidushim, and it's full of novel ideas that people don't know. In fact, it's so difficult because the whole purpose of the preface is coming to emphasize the fact that people think that it's simple and obvious, and no, it's very deep chokhmah. So right away, after the first paragraph, he's going to go to say that people don't study it and they're making a big mistake because they think that it's simple, and it's not simple. So how could he say in the first opening sentence that it's simple and obvious and everybody knows about it? And I'm just coming to remind you again and again. So this is the most difficult part of the Sefer. So one shot would be that even what you do know, you don't really have the benefit of what you do know only if you continuously review it. And if you know it or not, if you know what I'm going to tell you or not, doesn't make a difference. Whatever you do know, if you'll know more after I tell you, even better. But whatever you do know about Yesharim, if you don't constantly study it and inflame it, it's gonna extinguish. It's gonna die down. So it's important that a person shouldn't just say, "I know that already." He should continuously study it. Or this might be a sales pitch that someone's standing a sales pitch that someone's standing in this farm store. He takes out the book and he's going to tell them the first, I'm going to change your life. That's not a good sales pitch. People don't want to change their life.
It's a style of presentation that draws a person to want to know, because basically what he's giving over is logic. So he knows that once you hear it, you'll understand the logic, and you'll say, "Oh, I knew that." So it's his way of drawing
Okay.
into the Sefer.
Okay, so fine. But Lamaisa, there are many chidushim, and each time you read it, you get more chidushim, and it shouldn't be taken as a simple artificial. You could read it superficially. It should be studied in depth. But he does say that most people wouldn't have doubts about the issues. But as much as it is obvious and revealed, everyone knows its truth. There's much ignoring it. The word ignorance, just take the word ignorance as ignoring. I don't mean to be. The people ignore it and forget about it. And shikha. So it might be that forgetting would be unintentionally, and helem is that a person doesn't want to think about it because he wants to think about other things. So he doesn't pay attention to the things that are important. So he has to, therefore, be reminded. It's not enough that he once upon a time knew it, he forgets about it, and also he ignores it. Therefore, the benefit of this book is not gleaned from reading it one time. It could be that the reader will not find novel ideas after his reading that he didn't have before his reading. Only few. It could be you won't find many chidushim. Somebody pointed out that the whole time he says that you won't find, you might not find. That's a personal problem. If you didn't find it, it's there, but you just didn't find it. But there are many chidushim. But it could be that a person is going to read it after the first time and he didn't find any novel ideas. So that's not the benefit. The benefit is not to have a one-time reading. The benefit of this sefer is from reviewing it and being constant over it. Hasmada. Chazar means to review. Hasmada means lashon of tamid, constant review. So it's a beautiful thing that Baruch Hashem, we've been doing it a couple of times, and every time we finish, we come back to the beginning again, and that's the benefit that we're going to get. He will be reminded of the things that are naturally forgotten, and I'll take to heart his obligation that he is ignoring. So it helps for things that he forgets naturally, that a person, even if he knew something, he forgets it if he doesn't come back to it, and also the fact that he's ignoring it, because that's also going to be something that the physicality is going to make him ignore these issues, because the physical would remind him to eat and to sleep, but it wouldn't remind him of these issues. A person wouldn't naturally, automatically be reminded of these issues that he's lacking now, or he hasn't been on par with his level of Yirah Shamayim and Taras Alev, as we're going to see the issues of the subject. So this was his opening statement. However you want to understand it, introduction or a sales pitch, and to say that the issues are not new, but you must study it constantly, and that's what the purpose of the book is. But now he's going to go on. The rest of the preface is going to be a campaign to introduce the idea that it's not simple. It's not simple. The issues of generally called Chasidus or Yirah Shamayim are not simple, and they need a lot of study. And that's a big chiddush. And most Sfarim don't say so. Most Sfarim don't even say so. Most don't say this. They don't say the point that it's a wisdom. He's going to make a campaign to convince us that it's a deep wisdom. And
study it in order to understand.
Right. It's not something that's simple. Most people would say that it's simple. Of course, I'm not holding there yet, maybe, but I know what it is, and that's not it. But to be a righteous person doesn't take wisdom. To be a righteous person takes that a person should be truthful, maybe, and work hard. But that he has to be wise, that's not known. People all think that I know what it means to be righteous. I don't lack any wisdom. I just lack maybe motivation, or I have a Yetzer Hara, things that are impeding me, but not that there's any wisdom that I'm lacking. And he's going now to start a campaign that is not true. That there's a wisdom to become righteous, and if you don't have the wisdom, it's impossible to be righteous. And that's the beginning of his. He's starting now.
Wisdom as learning.
Learning wisdom, but there's a life wisdom also, you might say. But it's not something that people have naturally and that everybody has it. The wiser you are, the more potential you have to become more and more righteous. And then he goes on to Chasidus, which is something beyond being a tzaddik. There's a certain level called tzaddik, which will take us the first three levels, as we'll see, Ziras, Rizas, and Kiyas, will make a person into a tzaddik that's called righteous. And then there's a chassid, which is called pious, which the book is mainly correcting the mistakes, what people thought is chasidus. And piety is something which is big wisdom. Maybe I should be more accurate, that maybe to be righteous is not as big a wisdom as to be pious. because then you're already going beyond the letter of the law, so that needs special wisdom. To be righteous, it's true that everyone is expected to be righteous, and it isn't only for the wise. But I think we find many chidushim even in the first three levels that also help people to become truly righteous and not artificially righteous.
Not always is a wise person righteous, and not only.
Right, surely. Right, surely. That you'll have wise people that are not righteous because they didn't use their wisdom for it. In fact, in the other edition of the Hakadama, where we have debate between a Chacham and a Chassid, the Chacham is very wise, but he didn't study the subject. And here he's going to say the reason why people don't study this, wise people don't study the subject, is because they think that it's not a wisdom. It's nothing. It's not for wise people. Anybody could understand that he's supposed to be righteous and Yashar, Neman, and to love Hashem and to fear Hashem and serve Him with all your heart. What's the issue? But he's going to prove to us that it is a wisdom. V'tira, in Tizbona, in Behova, Berova Olam. You'll see, if you contemplate, study what happens in the world, look around the world, study people, you'll see, Ki rov anshe ha'seichel ha'mohir, v'apikchem ha'charifim, yasimu rov izbonenam v'istaklusam b'dakos ha'chochmos v'omek ha'yunim, ish, kifi netia sechlo v'chishko ha'tivi. All of the smart people that are naturally smart, have a great intellect, high IQ, they put most of their study into intricacies of wisdoms and deep analysis, each person according to his natural inclination and his intellectual inclination and his natural desire. People that are smart, then they apply themselves, they'll all be studying intricacies of wisdom, each one according to his natural disposition. Some people will study in the investigation of physics and nature, others in astronomy, others in geometry, each one according to his natural tendency. Other people according to different crafts and skills, how to develop different malachot. That's even in a mundane issue, even in the secular issue. Other people will enter more into holy issues, holy studies. To study the Torah. Also, people that are wise, they study Torah. What aspects of Torah are studied? Some people will study the intricacies of analyzing Gemara. Others in Midrashim, to study Midrashim and to explain them. Sometimes they're very difficult. And others in the Psak, to know what the verdict, what the Psak comes out when there's a question in the Gemara that needs a final verdict, so to know what the Psak should be. So we have all aspects of study, both in the secular world and in the Torah world. People are studying different intricate wisdoms. But there are very few people that dedicate their study and analysis to perfect service of Hashem. How are you supposed to serve Hashem? They don't consider that a subject that takes wisdom to study it. So you'd find very, very few people that are studying the subject of Avodas Hashem. And what would that include? Ala Ava, Ala Yira, Ala Dveikus, Al Kol Shar, Chelki HaChasidus. Love of Hashem, fear of Hashem, cleaving to Hashem, and other parts of piety. So you might say the reason why they don't is because they don't think that it's important. You might say the first choice when you see such a phenomenon happening that people are not studying Avodas Hashem because they don't think that it's so important. Maybe physics or astronomy is more important, or even the Pepuli Hashas. Even in the Torah, you'll say that the Pepuli Hashas is more important. To understand the Gemara and the Psak is more important. So he says, no, that's not the fact. That's not so. The not because these issues are not important by them. If you'd ask them, they would say that this is the most important thing. All these wise people, all these intellectual people, they'll all say that this is the most important subject. And no man could really be considered truly wise that he doesn't have clarity on all these subjects. So why don't you study it? If you agree that it's the most important thing, and no one would be considered wise if he doesn't have clarity on these subjects, so why are you not studying it? So he says right away, because they don't think that it says that it's a wisdom. There's nothing to study. Of course, anybody who doesn't have it, any wise man who doesn't have clarity on these subjects is not wise, because he doesn't even know basic things. But there's nothing intricate and deep about it. So there's nothing to study. Why should I spend my time studying? It's a simple subject. But the reason why they don't study it, because there's such obvious issues. They're obvious issues that doesn't take any kind of depth. They don't see a need to spend much time on its study. And therefore, so this study is only left, the study of these kind of books of Yiras Hashem is only left to those people that are not so intellectual, and you might even call them gasa seichel, that they're gross intellect. They're not a fine intellect. In other words, they're not smart. The people who end up learning these books is only the books. Let's say we would say Chovos Halvava, Shari Tshuva, Reishis Chachma, any of the Sifrei Musa, or take it for that, you might say the books of Tanakh also, Mishlei, Koheles, the books that speak about self-perfection. You won't see that people Chachamim started studying it. If anything, you're going to see the lower class of intellectual people that are studying it, people that are not so smart. Because that's easier. They're not going to be able to go into the Gemara, to delve into the intricacies of the give and take. They only see wisdom in those deep subjects. But in these subjects, the Hamonam, the simple people, are not able to study these deep subjects. So therefore they study these subjects which are, it's enough to have a superficial wisdom of them. Something like that also. All this form that would be available to the Hamonam. They don't see that this would be a deep wisdom. These people that are not smart, they're the people, if anything, if you find somebody reading these kind of books, it's going to be the simple folk. They're the ones who are reading these kind of books. According to what's become the norm, if you see somebody studying or becoming more pious, it's hard to resist from suspecting that he's not so smart. If you see a person who's becoming more pious, like something's wrong. He should be in the Besmedra studying something that's on a deep level. What's he doing becoming pious? It looks like we could suspect him that he's not so smart. What's that?
They're pretty pious.
So that's the Gemara question. What's considered pious? What's considered smart? That's going to be the question. If we find nowadays that there's a piety that's not a wisdom, so the Mesillas Shalom is coming to make a protest. That the true piety is only if it's a deep wisdom. And something which is not a deep wisdom is not under the category called deep piety. And there's even a possibility that a person who's not wise is not able to become pious. He should become righteous. But that he should become pious is very big chiddush if he's able to. That's what the Mesillas Shalom is going to drive towards, that a person who's not very wise is not able to become very pious. It depends on the level of his wisdom and his intellect that he's able to become pious. But he says that the situation, as we see it nowadays, is that it's not considered a wisdom, and the wise people are not studying it, and those who are studying it are not so wise. And he says the consequences of this norm are very sad. Vulam told us haminhag hazeh ros ma'od lachachamim v'lebilti chachamim. Everybody loses out. The consequences of this norm are bad consequences, both for the wise and for the unwise. Everybody loses out because nobody has true piety. Because everyone's lacking true piety. Nobody has authentic piety. It's very rare to find true piety. You have people that think that they're pious, but he says that they really don't have it. The people who are not wise, that are pious, don't have true piety. And the people.
Has he defined piety? How do we know what he's talking
about?
about?
He hasn't defined it yet. You're right. He hasn't defined it.
We don't know what he's talking about.
We don't know what he's talking about yet. But he's just starting the subject to say that this is the situation that we see, and then he's going to prove that it's a wisdom. He also didn't say what it is, but he's going to prove that it's a wisdom. First, he tells us the problem that under the norm that we have now, we don't have it. It's lacking from the wise people because they don't study it, and it's lacking from the unwise because they don't understand it, they don't comprehend it. They are studying it, but they don't comprehend it. The wise who have the potential to comprehend it, they're not studying it. And the unwise who are studying it, they don't have the intellect to be able to comprehend it. So nobody has it. This is paraphrasing a pasuk where it talks about a letter that hasn't been read. The wise person doesn't read it because it's a closed book. He hasn't opened the book. So he says, I can't read it because it's a closed book. And one who does have the letter, he doesn't know how to read. So he can't read it. So this is paraphrasing that pasuk that the wise don't have it because they're not studying it, and the unwise don't have it because they don't understand it.
So the wise are supposed to be teaching it to the ones who don't understand it.
According to their level. According to their level. But the point is saying that it's a wisdom. His main campaign is to say that it's a wisdom, and it shouldn't be taken that these are simple issues that don't take any study. I just have to make a decision. Like when I want to be righteous and pious, I know what to do. I just haven't decided to do it yet. Or even when he does decide, he decides to do it according to his understanding, which is a superficial understanding. And it says there are many mistakes that happen because of this false piety. עד שידע רוב בני האדם שהחסידות תלוי באמירות מזמורים הרבה ובידויים ארוכים מאוד, צומות קשים ותפילת קרח ושלג. He's talking about his time and place, and it might be that some of these things still do apply nowadays. It might be that expression changed nowadays, but he says that most people think that piety means saying many psalms and many long confessions and difficult fasting, abstaining from food, and immersing in ice and snow. So does that happen nowadays? I don't know if people what general pious would do nowadays. Could be you don't have that nowadays. It could be changed into a different style nowadays, which anybody might want to say what they think that is happening in the world nowadays.
No, it doesn't.
Okay,
Right?
that's not in style anymore. Not in style.
If you go to the retail, that's a cold next one.
This is Navardik is referring to as Navardik.
I don't think it existed at that time, Dafka, but whatever word considered Meschazdim, later on he's going to call the word the people that are not the true pious ones. They might mean well. He doesn't say don't mean well. He's not coming to blame them that they're evil. He's just saying that they're misled and they don't have the wisdom. But this was considered Meschazdim. Meschazdim means a person who's making himself pious. It's on the Hebrew, there's a chassid, who's a pious person. There's a mitchased, he's a person who's making himself pious. But he's not. He uses that word because he's not truly pious. Later on in the book, he calls them even Meschazdim hatipshim. The foolish mischastim, that they're taking something that they consider a chasidus, they dub it chasidus, and then they live that way, and they think that they're very pious, and it's not piety at all. His examples, these are his examples that he says, that they say long psalms, and they'll afflict them self-affliction. Some of these things might have been taken from different religions, and they applied it to Judaism as if it's also going to be self-affliction or whatever it might be. And he says it's not true piety. Nowadays there might be other forms of
Long hours of prayer.
might be. Okay.
Yeah, but isn't it? But
Long hours of davening.
there's not Tehillim.
He's going to say that that's not the definition of piety. Is there room for later on? I don't like to jump too much, but later on he's going to say there is a big benefit in Tehillim, to study Tehillim. To study Tehillim, he puts a big emphasis. To study Tehillim, to find out what true Hasidus is. But to say Tehillim is not so simple that's a piety. What is piety? So he's just telling you, he's not coming to analyze the subject here, but he's just saying that this is what is going around, this is what's happening by the mischazdim, by the people who are acting pious. And he says, Kulam dvarim asher ein hasechel nach bohem ve'ein hadash shoketa. All these issues are things that the intellect is not tranquil, is not calm with that the mind does not accept this to be true piety. People, wise people, don't accept this to be true piety.
Rationally?
Rationally. That it's not acceptable to the sound mind that this should be considered true piety. But the true, desirable piety is far from our imagination. It means we don't even know what it is. Not only are we not it, we don't even imagine what it is. What we see in the street as can be considered pious, it might be nowadays wearing a certain kind of clothing becomes a way of piety. A certain dress is going to be considered piety. Going to certain places is piety. If you take a plane ticket or not, but you have to go to certain places and being in a certain groups, that's considered piety. Certain songs, whatever you want to say. There's considered a piety that's very superficial, and he says that we don't even have a picture of what true piety is. This goes without, it's a simple thing. The Gemara says a rule of nature, that something that a person is not attuned to, he's not paying attention to, he's not going to notice it. He's coming to say that there are many issues that people would be able to notice. If they'd be studying it as a subject and putting their mind to it, they would notice what's true piety or not, but they're not studying the subject. And there's a klal. The Gemara says if you don't have the responsibility for something, so you don't notice it. They talk about this, that you can be in a room with people, and a person who has a reason why he wants to notice something, he'll notice it. But a person who has no issue to notice it, things will go unnoticed. Something which is your business to know, you'll notice it, and something that's not, you won't notice it. It is true that every upright person is fixed in his heart the basic principles of Hasidus. It means he's not going to say something that nobody ever heard of. He's not going to say that you have no idea this is piety. He's not going to come from a left field. The basic principles, everybody would have it innately. He calls it Adam HaYashar. Every upright man is fixed in his heart the premises and the foundations of Hasidus.